Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, president of the Sandstone Group. I've got my co-host here. This is also going out on the Energy Impacts podcast with David Blackman. David, how are you today?
Just lovely, man. It's a beautiful day in Texas.
You can't beat that with a stick, but you can beat a horse. But speaking of horses, we got a green chicken with us. We've got the Doomberg, and we're here to talk about some of his work. How are you, Mr. Doomberg?
Stu, David, doing great. No better way to start a week than a little energy talk with you guys. Looking forward to it.
I'll tell you what, I love your Substack, and it's one of my highlights when you've got your stuff out there. And I'm going to bring to the stage, Mr. Doomberg, your Substack. You can't buy this kind of entertainment. We've got two stories that we really want to cover today: hard landing and grid socialism. I'm bringing up your article, Hard Landing. Motorists in Northern California enter the hurt locker. This is an ongoing story, and I'd like to say thank you to all of Gavin Newsom's energy policies, adding millions of people to my channel because we write about this. But this was a great article, Doomberg.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Hard Landing is probably the fourth or fifth article we've written about the emerging crisis that is, well, I should say two crises, that is California. And it's really a fascinating thing because it is this slow-moving train wreck that everybody with even a superficial knowledge of the energy markets can see coming. In fact, the entire leadership of Sacramento sees it coming, but it can't really do anything about it. The sort of die is cast. And just to briefly summarize for those that aren't as familiar with this as the three of us are, California is actually two fuel islands, one clustered around San Francisco in the north and one clustered around Los Angeles in the south. And those two islands are not connected via pipeline, at least inbound pipeline, to the rest of the world. So you can't send crude oil from the Permian to California. And you also, more importantly, can't send finished product, refined product from anywhere in the US to California. Now, there's a couple of outbound pipelines, and they provide formulated gasoline and other refined products to Nevada and Arizona, which only makes the upcoming crisis potentially even worse. But because of a decades-long campaign of regulatory harassment, there's no other way to say it, of especially the refining industry in California, you're left with, you could count the number of major refineries that'll still be operating in California literally on one hand here soon. And if you divide California in two, Northern California in particular will be down to just two, because Valero is closing its Benicia refinery here, practically already has. And so Northern California, if you isolate it, is only capable of refining half of its fuel needs. So it must, by definition, import the balance. And because there's no pipelines to California, it must import the balance from overseas. And of course, because, irony is what it is, the biggest producer of inbound refined petroleum products in California in 2025 was India, which last we checked is buying Russian crude, which last we checked, Washington is trying to sanction off of the global markets. And the second or third one up there in the top was China, of course, which is not only refining Russian crude, but also Iranian crude and Venezuelan crude. And so you have this situation where sort of the left hand and the right hand in the U.S. are at odds with each other, but it is practically inevitable. Let's take a step back. Why would a state like California, filled as it is with progressive environmental lunatics, harass the refining industry? Well, refining is a challenging business. You're moving huge amounts of highly explosive materials around. You're heating them up, you're pressurizing them, you're doing chemical transformations. And every once in a while, inevitably, something goes boom. It just happens. You can't deal with explosive gases, flammable liquids at the scale required to keep the cars in California on the road without occasionally having an explosion. And with such explosions come releases and environmental issues, and the people that live next to them, the property values surrounding refineries tend to be low, and for obvious reasons, especially downwind of refineries. And so as a consequence of that, you have a certain sort of economic demographic that assembles around refiners. And then when refineries go boom, there's no shortage of totally legitimate sad stories to tell. The health effects are real. It's just, again, in life, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And so it's a right target. It feels good to hit a refinery. The refinery business is a terrible business. Ultra low margins, huge risks, all that stuff. And so you have this situation where, because of decades of regulatory harassment, it's become prohibitively expensive to do business in California. And guess what? Profit gouging accusations notwithstanding, to the major players, owning a refinery in California is not accretive. I mean, they have global operations. There's easier money to be made. And so they just either sell to less well-capitalized private equity firms or shut the thing down. And what we're seeing is both. And so now we've reached a point where there's no redundancy in the system. So what happens when one of the two remaining refineries in the Bay Area goes boom? Because it's going to go boom. Like, there's going to be an accident.
Yep.
And by the way, last I checked, that could be wrong. I think there's like 11 days of supply in inventory. And that's assuming nobody panics and stands in line and tries to fill their cars with all of their neighbors all at the same time, which of course predictably happens whenever rumors of a shortage begin to spread. And so you have this tinderbox, pun intended, in Northern California in particular, and it's just going to go boom, and you're going to see $10 a gallon gasoline just in time for Newsom to try to convince the country that he should be promoted. So yeah. By the way, the point of this article, I know this is a long answer, but there's second and third order consequences of these decisions. And so shutting down Valero's refinery immediately means that the one crude oil pipeline that connects the oil producing fields of Kern, California to the Bay Area no longer has sufficient volume to keep operating, and it's shut down. And so now that truck that you saw in that picture is meant to say that instead of a nice, environmentally safe, low carbon footprint pipeline carrying crude from the oil fields of California, what little crude is produced there, to what little refineries remain. Instead of that pipeline, now you have 100 trucks a day going up and down the highways of California,
right,
to bring that crude to the refinery. So, the hydrocarbon industry is at once absolutely essential, but also a classic nonlinear chaotic system. And you have these second and third order effects that are difficult to model if you live in a spreadsheet. But there's a reason why you have redundancy. Redundancy in chaotic systems is to force an artificial linearity onto this system. And you take away that buffer, and then suddenly you're redlining it. And a butterfly flaps its wings, and you're paying $15 a gallon gasoline. And so here we are. But it is very predictable. We like to say proof of predictability is to have predicted it. And so here we are.
When some of the other things, side benefits that Gavin Newsom, besides embarrassing the United States and Europe this past week, man, that was embarrassing with him and AOC and all the others. Holy smokes, what an embarrassment. But when we sit back and take a look, you've got Gavin Newsom creating an energy security risk, because last year they imported a tanker of jet fuel from India that, like as you point out, was bought from Russia. And now you have Washington and Oregon. We have the whole West Coast in a problem because the refineries that are owned in California own one or two up in Washington that are going to shut down. This is now a real West Coast energy security problem.
Yeah, well, it's of course worse than that. There's what, 40, 50, 60 major military bases sprinkled up and down the coast.
Yep.
And if you're dependent on China for the jet fuel that you need, or the diesel for your merchant fleet or your naval fleet, and you want to surge, let's say, I don't know, to Taiwan, well, China just shut that off, right? Like it is a real risk, and like it's so transparent to see, and it's but again, you characterize Gavin Newsom as embarrassing in Europe. I would not take the man lightly. I know I've said this on your show before.
Yes,
he is favored to win in 2028, in our view. The math is very simple. I mean, Trump beat Harris in the general vote by 1.5 points. Is he 1.5 points better than she was as a candidate? Forget policy. Is whoever runs in Trump's place potentially 1.5 points worse than he was at whipping up sort of frenzy on the right to vote for him? Whether they still have that frenzy today remains to be seen. He's losing the base for a variety of reasons. But 1.5 points, razor's edge. And Newsom is a far more effective retail politician than Kamala Harris ever was.
Oh, no doubt. But he's going to have to figure out how to beat Kamala Harris in a Democratic primary.
He's got that wrapped up.
Beating him by 25 points.
If that's on Polymarket, I'm going to get myself.
It's not on Polymarket. It's the latest poll from.
Sure, but whatever the odds are on Polymarket, I bet on
Insider Advantage.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
The Polymarket odds. I don't. That system's so easy to rig that I've stopped paying attention to it. So I don't really know what's happening out there.
I find it a fascinating source of data, though, but that's probably a topic for another.
It is a great source of data, but it's so easy for big bettors to rig it.
That's data itself. But yeah. I agree with you.
When we sit back and take a look at the politics, and I just want to ask this before we get back into energy on this, do you think that passing the SAVE Act, where voter ID actually matters and you have to be a citizen, would actually impact the midterms?
I mean, hypothetically, but it's not going to pass. We have an operating mental model that in a secret ballot, 80% of the Senate would vote to remove Trump from office. It's not going to pass because they'd have to break the filibuster. They don't have the votes to break the filibuster. They're all climbing on board and co-sponsoring the SAVE Act, which is being driven by Senator Mike Lee from Utah, who's, I believe, a great patriot. But it's easy to co-sponsor it when you know it's not going to go into law. And even if it did, the tsunami of lawsuits and let's call it unfavorable judges will extend and pretend this legal debate to well past the midterms and probably into 2028. And post midterms, you could easily see the filibuster won't survive Democratic majority, and they'll stuff the Supreme Court. And so I don't think that I think it is crazy that you don't have to prove that you're a citizen in order to vote. Anybody who's opposed to it, we understand what their motivations are.
They're pretty clear at this point, aren't they?
And so, like I was just thinking about all the number of times a week I have to show my ID to do something. Can't even, get a case of beer without showing your ID because you have to prove that you're over 50 now. And not only do you just have to prove that you're over 50, they have to prove that they asked. And so they scan your ID every time, no matter what. So my point is, I think it's a little foolish to think the SAVE Act is going to meaningfully change. And frankly, there's no such thing as the Republican Party in Washington. I've made this point to my conservative friends who are disappointed with Trump and don't understand why the Senate Republicans just don't do what the Democrats will obviously do. Well, they're all on the same team. They just wear different jerseys.
Yeah.
80% of the Senate doesn't want Trump's agenda imposed. They were quite happy with the old agenda. It enriched them. And so, I think there's Republican Party at the state level, at the county level. The further you get from your house, the more rampant looting you have. And if these, files that we won't name and give you any indication as to how things are actually operated at that level, well, if you had any doubt before, don't be naive. So there's no such thing as the Republican caucus in the Senate. I mean, give me a break. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are best friends.
Yep. If we sit back and take a look, how do you feel that the removal of the endangerment of CO2 as with the EPA and Lee Zeldin last week, do you think that that's going to revitalize some of the energy potential of reducing costs to the oil companies and coal companies?
I think it's a monumental event. I don't think that we should diminish what has transpired. The persistence of it and whether it survives "quote unquote" judicial review remains to be seen. But the event itself is real and really important. And of course, much depends on the midterms and the 2028 election and all that stuff. But the further you push this stuff in one direction, the harder it is to go all the way back. And look, Trump is an enigma, right? I mean, he's we like to say all the things his biggest supporters and his harshest critics say he is. He's in our view so right on so many policies and so wrong on a few others. Like, what are we actually doing in Iran? You ran on not going to war. But anyway, I digress. Back to the question at hand. It's a big deal. The entire endangerment finding was fraudulent in the first place. It was an Obama gambit that radically changed the country in ways the framers of the Constitution would have never envisioned. Of course, there's a long list of such initiatives that we can point to, but this one's a pretty big one because the endangerment finding effectively means the government can control everything. In fact, you combine the endangerment finding with the wild abuse of the Commerce Clause, and then you have essentially the Frankenstein federal government that we have today, which thinks it's business to regulate a puddle of water in land that I own somewhere in rural Midwest. In no universe did the framers intend this to be the system of governance of the United States of America, but here we are. And the endangerment finding is one of the major pillars, fraudulent pillars of federal government power. And for Trump to even temporarily knock it out is important. However, the caveat is we are in the middle of significant whiplash politically in the US, and the planning cycle of the energy sector is longer than the political cycle of the United States.
Yeah.
And we could whiplash back just as hard. Again, you get a solid Democrat, a solid majority of senators wearing the Democratic jersey, and you have Newsom as president, and you stuff the Supreme Court. All this could be undone rather rapidly and will be undone. If you have any doubt about what will happen, just look at what's going on in Virginia, which is a classic 50-50
that very point on Friday on
50-50 state, which is going to have a 10-to-1 Democratic representation in Congress here soon as they, gerrymander the maps.
Wow.
And they're going to just steamroll. But again, we've been cautioning about this. Your strength is your weakness. It sucks to be early in many ways, but like when the Democrats regain power, a lot of people in the current administration are going to jail.
Yep.
There will be aggressive prosecutions of virtually anybody who was involved in what's going on right now. It's just to deny that is the likelihood, I think, is to deny reality.
There's about 16 different questions that just keep coming up right now. After every time you talk, sir, it just absolutely, it gets me rolling. We do have a question here from We the People Alaska. I love Alaska. My grandfather is attributed for discovering the North Slope. The endangerment finding won't reduce cost. Carbon trading, valuation, and profiteering is alive and well. This brings up two other gigantic questions, and let me add to the stage. Your grid socialism, the EU's plan to make electricity and uniform expensive for all. I want to ask on this article, as well as carbon trading and the EU's CBAM and all of their other stuff, if they try to impose their CBAM and carbon imposing on the US LNG exporters, that's going to hit them in the foot or the forehead, whichever comes first. I'm not sure. So the question is, A, what were you thinking on grid socialism in the EU? But how will that impact US energy?
Yeah, two different questions. So grid socialism was inspired by this push within the European Union to interconnect all of the national grids in a meaningful way using, large interconnector cables, like literally connect cables, connect the countries via these large, high voltage cables. Like, so for example, right there, just scroll back up a bit. The Aurora line connects northern Sweden to Finland. The chart prior to that shows you that Finland has wildly overproduced wind, and its wind generation has overtaken its highly dispatchable generation. So that's hydroelectricity generation in Finland right there in blue. And it doesn't have much in the way of natural gas, especially after the gas from Russia was cut off. And so nuclear is great. Nuclear is 40% of their grid, but nuclear is not ideal for rapid load following. It's not highly dispatchable in the way that hydroelectricity is with an impoundment dam or natural gas is. And so you don't have natural gas. You basically just have hydroelectricity. And as a rule of thumb that we've created and tried to popularize, whenever you see intermittent generation exceed highly dispatchable, things begin to break. So something broke in Finland, and Sweden bailed it out via that new connection. Well, what is the net effect to consumers in northern Sweden, do you think, Stu?
Increased price.
Their bills went up. So the socialism is about equality for all, and almost always means everyone pays equally more. And by interconnecting countries that have overinvested in renewables, like Finland, to countries that have not yet, like Sweden, who has excess highly dispatchable electricity to spare, you're taking the expensive mistakes of Finland and spreading the costs all around the EU, which is ultimately the end result of this little experiment that they're doing. And if you scroll down all the way to the bottom to the second chart, we've taken that chart right there, highly dispatchable and intermittent, and we looked at all of the EU. If you scroll down, you'll see what's coming for the EU. Again, this is all very predictable. Scroll down, right there. That is hydro plus natural gas in blue, plotted against wind and solar for all 27 member states of the EU. And when yellow crosses blue, things begin to break. And you're not building all that much in the way of hydroelectricity dams in Europe. And you're shutting down Russian natural gas, and you're replacing with expensive US and Qatari natural gas. But what you are doing is building an awful lot of wind and solar. And so it's only a matter of time before Finland becomes the EU and Sweden becomes everybody else. And the EU, everybody in the EU gets to pay more to make room for wind and solar. Now, to your question about US LNG exports. The US has Europe on its knees in this regard. I mean, okay, let's talk through what happens. Trump gets mad at von der Leyen. They disagree on something. He wants Greenland. I don't know. Just pick a crazy hypothetical. And he says, all right, no LNG for you. What does that mean? It means the grid collapses in Europe. And natural gas is dirt cheap on the US Gulf Coast. And some LNG exporters lose some money. Okay. Trump cuts them a check. But Henry Hub goes to 50 cents a million BTU and Dutch TTF goes to $40 a million BTU. Who wins? The US wins. So it's the same thing as like cutting off Russian natural gas. Like, yes, they lose some revenue, but they have a ton of cheap gas they could use to say, I don't know, make weapons, bombs, artillery shells, to dig for copper and rare earths and all the other things that you might want to burn natural gas to do. Like, the molecule is important. It's more important than the price. And so this whole carbon reporting, nonsense that the EU is trying to impose on Qatar and the US. I mean, unlike Qatar, the US has a manufacturing sector that can use that cheap gas. And yes, Venture Global will suffer, and yes, Cheniere will suffer, and you could just write them a nice little check. And there's just an enormous amount of natural gas in the US.
Well, but isn't also Doomberg, if the EU does force the US and Qatar LNG out of their market with this idiotic rule, that means that a lot of LNG cargoes out of Algeria, Australia, other providers are going to be going to Europe instead of Asia. And so that's going to open up new markets in Asia or Africa, wherever.
No, but those other LNG exporters will suffer from the same issues.
Sure.
Right. So they won't actually be able to go to Europe because it'll be even more expensive for them to comply. The thing about regulations,
well, that's true. Yeah.
It makes regulations in aggregate always benefit big companies because on a per pound basis or a per BTU basis or a per barrel basis, it's cheaper for Exxon to comply with something than it is for pick your small independent oil and gas producer. And so in reality, this can't happen. Europe will have to fold. It will fold because it cannot live without LNG now that it has cut off Russian natural gas. And as much as it would like to not be dependent on natural gas, it still uses an enormous amount of natural gas, not just for electricity, by the way, but for also industrial heat for what industry remains and for heating homes.
Can I, speaking of Russian natural gas, Bloomberg, the imitator of Doomberg, the Bloomberg wrote an article last week, because you're the man, they're an imitator. But Bloomberg did write an article saying that Putin's got a memo asking to join the US dollar. I don't know if it's true or not. I think it's kind of funny, but when you sit back and look at it, if that is actually a true memo, that could end the war because we've captured, 7 to 8 tankers.
Let me stop you. That was the biggest load of horse, what, that I've ever read in the legacy media. What a load of nonsense. I mean, talk about BS. So every once in a while, we've noticed this. Take the Financial Times. Look, I subscribe to Bloomberg. I have a Bloomberg terminal. They get several tens of thousands of dollars a year of our business. I have a lot of respect for Bloomberg. I read the Financial Times. I read the New York Times. I read the Washington Post. I read Upstream Online. I read RBN Energy. I read everything. Yep. Every once in a while, you see an article that is just total BS. And the articles always follow the same tack. And we wrote a piece once. I don't think we published it. I forget. They blurred, but the title was called Sources Said. Like, this piece, which I guarantee 1000% is just not true. This piece was diplomats familiar who have seen a document. Now, what reporter tied to Bloomberg is the Kremlin talking to? The answer would be none. This is literally again, it is probably literally true that diplomats told whoever wrote this story the things they told them and shared with them a document that these reporters saw. So it's not like an outright lie in the sense that, like, if you read the literal statement of but the sources said title is the story becomes what the sources said, not whether there's any possibility that what they're saying is correct. And in fact, the article itself goes into great pains to say that this is probably very unlikely and utterly inconsistent. So, for example, this is why I say you should read everybody's propaganda. We read a ton of Russian propaganda, and this is wholly inconsistent with what everybody in the Russian government is saying. And so when we saw it, gold started selling off, right? Because, by the way, if this was true, gold isn't at 5,000. And I told a friend of mine who was trading, I was like, if the market is selling off on this story, like it's a buying opportunity, because like this is nonsense. So anyway, that particular story just happened to rub me the wrong way when I saw it, because it's just so classic legacy media nonsense. Like,
Doomberg, I'm sorry, but it was fun watching your feathers get ruffled.
it is such malarkey to, and we see these stories a lot. You know, the Financial Times is this way. So like the Financial Times, I love the Financial Times, but it's British propaganda. It's far more serious than some of the stuff we see in the tabloids. But every once in a while, there's a story in the Financial Times that is just total horse. You know what? I wish I could swear, but you know what I mean.
They're not the only ones. The Economist is a willing partner in that kind of.
I would say the Financial Times is more serious than the Economist. The Economist is pretty bad. It's on the spectrum.
I would say Financial Times used to be more serious than the Economist.
Sure, but there's still some really great stuff, like this floating LNG article that came out overnight. It's a really great article, and it's going to lead to a Doomberg piece. They didn't quite take it as far as we intend to take it, but then you see this story, you know, like there's stories in the Financial Times every once in a while where you're just like, it's just so wrong. And like one wonders, I mean, again, the sources said was such a great title for a piece. I'm pretty sure we didn't publish it. Like one thing about our brand, and this is something we cultivate with our subscribers, and if this ever changes, then we deserve to be put out of business. We 100% believe whatever we write when we hit send. That in that moment, I mean, we might change our mind, we might be proven wrong, new information might make us look foolish. But when that email hits your inbox at 5 a.m. Eastern from Team Doomberg, every word in that piece we believe to be true, authentically. Again, not afraid to be wrong, but we would never write something that we didn't believe, even if we had it from 2 sources or 3 sources. You know, people reach out to Doomberg all the time trying to plant stories with us. And sometimes we take them and they're great, and we put our own spin on it. I mean, we love inbound story ideas. 99% of them are authentic, but every once in a while you get a sense that somebody's trying to spin something to you.
Yeah.
And usually involves a penny stock listed in Vancouver. Not always, but that's what we in the business would call a red flag. This story, I mean, give me a break. Like, so Putin has been dumping U.S. treasuries, buying gold, gone to war 3 different times, Crimea, Georgia, now broader Ukraine, has suffered an avalanche of sanctions, it's been accused of war crimes, has an arrest warrant out. And all of this, they're just going to say, didn't mean it. Let's go back on the US dollar system and submit to Trump's new grand plan. I mean, give me a break. First of all, he wouldn't survive in office.
Yeah.
The threat to Putin is not from the Western friendly side of the Russian political scene. It's from the hard right side, from the side of Russia that believes Putin has been too soft in Ukraine. And believe me, that side exists, and it's spoken to on Russian television all the time.
Wow.
Like, if there's a coup in Russia, the risk of nuclear war escalates radically, in our view.
Right. So the story of Putin being a bad man, but he's not the bad man. There's worse men out there.
There's a lot of bad men in politics around the world, and the U.S. does business with
Bad
an awful
women,
lot of
too.
them. And, well, I mean, yes, but I would say anyway. Historically, you know, the strongman dictator in pick your developing nation, the U.S. does business with such people all the time. So,
Yeah.
you know, yes, I get it. Putin is bad. I get it. Xi
So
Jinping
I would like your take on something.
sure.
Speaking of bad women in politics, Ursula von der Leyen spoke Saturday at Munich,
Mhm.
right after Marco Rubio, and said she's planning to do away with the unanimity clause
Yep.
in the European Union's charter.
Mhm.
What is your take on that? I mean, to me, it
Yes.
just ends any sovereignty remaining for EU member countries, right?
Well, the whole issue is Hungary and Viktor Orban,
Right.
and
Right.
there is a multi-front war against Orban. So the first front is this upcoming election, I think April 10th or 12th in Hungary.
Yeah.
All kinds of dirty tricks are being played on both sides. Fascinating to watch.
Shocking. Yeah.
The main challenger to Orban has been caught on film doing something at a party that seemed to have a fair bit of, let's say, refreshments and other accelerants. But who filmed it and why is it coming out now is an interesting thing. And Lord knows there's no shortage of dirty tricks that we played against Viktor Orban. So in the ideal world, Ursula von der Leyen and the European power brokers in Brussels would displace Orban with a EU-friendly successor, and that would end the problem. Absent that, then they're moving more and more important decisions away from unanimity, which is how the European Union was sold to get the original treaties passed in the countries that they bothered to allow to have a vote, to majority only. They've already made some major decisions circumventing Hungary's veto. If Orban wins, it's a big if, by the way. It's hard for somebody like him to resist the full weight of the Brussels propaganda machine. If Orban wins, then that brings forward the inevitable collapse of the European Union, in our view. And we define collapse of the European Union as an important country leaving it. No country's ever left it. And once that taboo is broken, I think that the catalyst of the collapse of the EU will be rather quick. But I don't know that Orban will win. He's been in power for a long time.
He has, yeah.
And politicians have an expiration date. And as much as I think that he has tried his best to lead his country well, there's corruption issues and all kinds of, they can't be in power that long without having their own share of dirty laundry, if for no other reason than, you know, people insert themselves into your machine and do bad things on purpose as sort of elaborate, intelligence-driven false flag operations just to embarrass you. Like that kind of stuff happens all the time too, right?
It certainly does.
Let's not kid ourselves here. But especially when a small country like Hungary has become the fulcrum nation in the future stability of the European Union, there's an enormous amount of money and power behind keeping the status quo. And Viktor Orban has stood in the path of that. And that takes a brave man to do it, because the historical track record of such people is not a glorious one.
We have an interesting comment from Bonita Beach 3127. Trump will have to nationalize the oil business in California and absolutely the refineries.
It's an interesting dilemma. There's talk within California about California privatizing, not privatizing, what's the word I'm looking for? Seizing these refineries and operating them at the state level. I don't know which would be worse. Washington trying to run these refineries.
They can't run a fire department. How in the world are they going to run a refinery?
Yeah, there's no good answers. I mean, the best answer is a robust private sector that is properly remunerated for taking the risks of compounding their own capital. That is not happening. That's not an option anymore in California. So you're left with a suite of very bad outcomes. a
Well,
better
isn't there a strong argument that it presents a real national security problem for the United States?
Yeah, so you could imagine the War Powers Act and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
The real answer is to, well, not the real answer. A suitable second best answer is to rapidly build product pipelines from the Gulf Coast to California through Arizona, and there's some plans to build some of those. But then you have to do a lot of, eminent domain stuff and overcome environmental lawsuits and all that jazz. I mean, the expressed intent of the Greenpeaces of the world is to starve California of fuel.
Another question for you is, there is on the Jones Act, there is precedent for seized tankers to be put into service and would be considered U.S. material. So there is a precedent on several seized tankers that have been pressed into service. That's one way around it, is immediately seize a bunch of dark fleet tankers, and you can start shipping everything you want to California.
I mean, or you could just buy them. Yeah, but the problem is still you got to go around the Panama Canal, and it's a long way by boat from Houston to San Francisco.
It is.
And so it's not ideal. Ideal is you produce your own oil in California.
Almighty Doomberg,
yeah,
they're importing 68 to 70% of their oil now. They don't have a refinery, and when they ran into a bit of a crisis, they had to import from India a jet fuel. So you're going to be importing if you don't have refineries.
Sure. So my point is, does it really matter the flag of the tanker at some point? The solution is to drill in California, to open up their giant shale resource, to build a few more refineries, and to connect via pipelines. In other words, to build a resilient hydrocarbon molecular highway.
So you're saying do a energy intervention before they become Venezuela?
I just think it's irreversible at this point. I mean, we're all talking hypotheticals that just aren't going to happen.
I think it is. I think that the Katie Grimes is the editor-in-chief at the California Globe, and I'll be interviewing her here. She's been on this story very well and very well articulated on it. And she said it's too far gone.
It's too far gone. Yeah, it's too far gone.
So at what point do you step in order to save a national security risk for the entire West Coast? People say California is the national security risk. I've elevated it to the entire West Coast because it is it's rolling up through Oregon and Washington.
It's the government is not good at preempting these things, and it's also not good at reacting to them.
No.
Katrina, for example, the fire risk in Los Angeles, great example. Like everybody saw what was coming, and next thing you know, and still you can't get a permit to rebuild your home. Like this bridge in Baltimore. I mean,
remember when that was going to be rebuilt in a year?
Yeah, I mean, come on, have they even poured any concrete yet?
No, they haven't even finished the cleanup yet.
I mean,
from the accident that knocked it down.
China's replacement bridge would have collapsed and been rebuilt by now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So what do you see coming around the corner for reindustrialization of the United States? Because we have a lot of plants coming in. Energy security starts at home, but energy dominance comes from your exports. And I see that we are reindustrializing as opposed to the European Union deindustrializing. What are you seeing?
Yeah, much depends on the politics. Again, the whiplash component of the transition from Biden to Trump should not be underestimated. As much as we might support the direction of travel, the velocity of change is unsettling. This is why this piece we wrote about Darren Woods, I think, resonated. This article we wrote about that infamous meeting over Venezuela in the White House, A Brief History of Times. Exxon is, like, we all know Exxon, the most rigorous, careful, rigid culture you've ever met. Much to admire about Exxon's culture, by the way. They're just, that's him sitting next to Trump's chief of staff. And they're just not going to ask Trump how high they need to jump when he asks them to jump. It's just not how they work. And the whiplash part of it means that, God, Trump knows how to take a photo, doesn't he?
That was one of the greatest stunts ever.
That's the caption, I think, is if you scroll, I think, what was that? And this, by the way, stop right here. This is fascinating, just to show you how quickly things change. You know who this is, right?
Yeah, our former Secretary of State.
Yeah, well, I would call him former CEO of ExxonMobil.
Well, that too.
Rex Tillerson, getting the highest honor from Russia that a non-Russian can get. This is in 2013, like just a year before Russia was ostracized from the international community. You have the CEO of the most important company in America who cut his teeth in Russia, got the job as the head of Exxon because of the work he did in Russia. That was like just a little more than a decade ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, times change.
Yeah, and there's Hugo.
Hugo.
Yeah, so Venezuela, I know you wanted to talk about it, and I know that we're coming up against it here, but yeah, there's the next president of the United States.
I'm going to go get airsick.
Nah, it's fine. You know, Doomberg was born and flourished under Biden. You know, we'll be fine.
Oh, I know we will, but holy smokes. I swear if he actually dives into the bay, there will be an oil slick to remember.
He's gonna win. I hate to break it to you guys, but I'm making the call.
Wow. I can't wait to be censored and shut down again.
Yeah, you know, it's what it is. Life comes at you fast too. What can I tell you?
You know, it's just amazing to me how bad they tried to shut me down, but I'm like a whack-a-mole. I keep popping up on all the channels. So it's kind of like, if you try to speak the truth, it will pop out eventually.
Our plan is to bank as much as we can before then.
Yeah.
Your plan is to what?
Bank as much as we can before then. Harvest those subscriptions.
There you go. I do recommend highly going to Doomberg.com and follow you and subscribe to your Substack. I love your Substack and your whole team. They're doing a great job. Tell us what else you got going on.
Well, we got Doomberg, of course. We have our pro tier. We got an exciting talk for our premium subscribers coming up this week on copper.
Nice.
Probably going to disappoint a few copper bulls, but and we have Classics Read Aloud, which is a sister publication where we curate and bring back to life brilliant works of literature produced in the same Doomberg quality. And then also, just between the three of us, we are putting the finishing touches on a book contract.
Nice.
We've got a couple of titles up in the air, but we've got a verbal agreement to do a book with a pretty serious publisher, and we've got an excellent agent who shot that book idea for us. And the purpose of the book actually is to expand the Doomberg brand beyond the Substack world, because as important as Substack is to us, it still has very small market penetration actually in the grand scheme of things, which is great because we're investors in Substack, which means it has a lot of room to grow. And so, yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on. Once we get that book on it, hopefully it'll come out in 2027. But we're going to do the full Doomberg marketing job on it. Try to get it. It's going to be a fun project.
And you need to put in there that podcasting helped make you guys.
Oh yeah, you know we but that whole world, like you say that it's of course a core part of our strategy. When we built Doomberg, we had two marketing objectives. One was, we must be a must-follow FinTwit account. And then two is we'll be the world's best podcast guest. Podcasting is a great way to get your brand out.
Yeah, it is.
And people ask, like, this is a mutual back-scratching society, right? If we're a good guest and some of our audience goes to you guys, and then you guys are good hosts and some of your audience comes to us, is synergistic, and people think it's mysterious. Like, no money changes hands. You just send us an email. You want to come talk? We show up. We talk. Then off we go. Only thing else. Go ahead.
You are not a yes chicken. I mean, a yes man. I mean, I would prefer you almost to be more like Foghorn Leghorn. I'm telling you, boy, I mean, that to me would be actually really cool. But you don't. You actually give your opinion, and whether you like your opinion or not, it is your opinion based on what you think are facts. And I applaud that very much.
I think that's what's missing in the legacy media, and so why would you change that? The only challenge with doing podcasts, I'll give you a bit of an inside baseball, which I'm sure you know, but whenever we go on podcasts that are more YouTube based, you can't control the thumbnail. and so in order to get the clicks, sometimes the thumbnails are just wild and like the opposite of what we said. I remember I was on a podcast, pretty high profile podcast. I love the host, great guy. I won't name him, but asked me a bunch of questions about oil and then said, and I was bearish oil because, we've been bearish oil for a long time, correctly so. And asked me a bunch of hypotheticals, and one of the hypotheticals was, give me a scenario where we would see $300 oil. So I gave him a scenario. I was like, it's nowhere near our base case, but here's a theoretical way where we might temporarily see $300 a barrel oil. And then I said, oh, by the way, it's shorting opportunity of a lifetime. And guess what was on the thumbnail? Oil to 300? Question mark.
Yeah.
And so, you can't really control the, there you go. That is consistent with what we discussed.
You sent a note and said, this is my brand and please follow the brand. And I said, yes, sir. So
we sent no such note. for the record, what you do with your thumbnail and promote your show is up to you.
No, but we respect you. We respect your brand, and we appreciate everything that you're doing.
Yeah, same. It's fun.
David, you got any last questions here?
No, man. Thank you for all you're doing. I found that poll I was talking about. It's a new TIP poll, TIPP organization, which is not the best polling organization in the world. But
the Democratic and Republican nomination polls 2 years out is going to be pretty.
I'm just saying that if Kamala gets in the race, Newsom is not going to have a walkover in that primary.
Here's a long shot possibility to leave you with in the great state of California, which would shake things up. Given the obscure way in which California selects its governor, it's possible that we'll see 2 Republican candidates in the runoff to replace Newsom.
Wow.
I suspect the Democrats will find a way to manufacture.
They'll find a way to fix that, but that's a non-zero possibility.
No voter ID requirement in California, so they'll get it done.
They'll save it.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, Mr. Doomberg, what article are you working on next?
We've got a piece coming out with my favorite title yet. It's in edit this morning. The title is called More Cowbell. And the social preview is thoughts on what's missing from the 20th sanctions package in Europe. With this 19 times didn't work, but the 20th is going to be devastating. So we need more cowbell in Europe. And then we've got another piece coming out, building off of this Financial Times floating LNG piece. The tentative title is Infinity Machines. And then the copper doom zoom for our pro tier is called Copper Imminent Super Cycle or Mostly Hype. So we'll see. That's a fun one. That's about a 40-minute presentation that we just recorded over the weekend, and it's in edit right now. So cool. All right, guys, this is great. And great way to start the week.
I'll tell you what, this is a lot of fun. And Doomberg, thank you again for everything that you're doing. And we definitely look forward to our next time. Let me make sure we're all ready here. And again, for Stuart Turley, David Blackman, this is going out on both of our channels, the David Blackman Energy Impacts podcast and the Energy Newsbeat podcast. And Doomberg, I just want to give you again a thank you and a shout out. You're approaching a lot of listens on our brand, and we do appreciate you for that.
Same here. Mutually beneficial. See you guys.
All right. See you.